Hi, everyone. We are very glad that you're all here. Thank you for coming. I'm Paul Weirwine, and I will be MC this evening. Before we provide a quick intro to co before we provide a quick intro to co-housing and then bring on our guest speaker, we are excited to announce that we are transitioning from Twin Cities Co-housing Network to Co-housing Minnesota. We will continue in our nonprofit mission of educating the public about co-housing, but to a wider audience. Look for information about this in upcoming issues of our newsletter. Co-housing Minnesota is an all-volunteer organization, and your donations help sustain us. You can donate via our website. Maria, would you please brief our audience on what is co-housing?
I would love to. Thank you, Paul. I am Maria. Co-housing is a type of intentional community, which, as the name suggests, is a group of people dedicated to greater social connection and interdependence. Co-housing is a way for people to have private dwellings, but also have common amenities, public spaces, and shared services. If you're interested, Coho US, which is in the corner right here, is the national organization for promoting and supporting co-housing. These communities are often designed to be built with a common house, smaller and closer together units, and many different public spaces. Since their design is mostly up to the community, many of these places reflect the culture or ideals they want to inhabit. As you might be able to see here in these different photos, each community looks pretty different from the next. How design affects community is something our wonderful speaker is going to talk to us about a little more soon. So I won't say too much about this. So Paul, you can introduce Sam.
After our guest speaker, you'll want to stay on for local group updates, and if time allows, we'll open it up for general questions about co-housing and co-housing Minnesota. But now we're very excited and grateful to have Sam Naylor with us tonight to share some of his findings and insights on how design can foster human connection and the ethos and spirit of cooperative living. As a working architect and recipient of the Druker Traveling Fellowship from Harvard's Graduate School of Design, Sam visited over 100 intentional communities on 4 continents. These included co-housing communities, cooperatives, ecovillages, and smaller kinds of communal living arrangements. Tonight, we'll get a sampling of what he has gleaned from his research about how the built environment can help and impact those who want to live in a more neighborly and cooperative way. Sam has written several research and policy texts and is an associate of Utile, which aptly describes itself as a Boston-based design firm built like a think tank. Sam is also interested in how housing design and policy can contribute to economic justice. After his talk, Sam will take questions. You can ask him a question directly or put it in the chat, and Becca will ask for you. You can note down a question in the chat at any time. Please join me in welcoming architect, researcher, author, and world traveler, Sam Naylor.
Thank you so much. One introduction. I think of myself as just a humble architect. Okay, let's see here. Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you, Paul, and Becca and Maria and everyone. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here, and it's, I think, really interesting that you guys have such a consistent panel of speakers, and I was watching some of the videos on the YouTube channel. I think sharing knowledge is an amazing way. All the different co-housing and cooperative communities I visited have in common is just really active about spreading the word and wanting to share and steal and be transparent and just copying is good. This is like I'm going to give a talk. I mean, I hope it's like 30 minutes or so. It's a abbreviated version of a larger lecture I gave after a traveling fellowship, and then at the end I have a couple more projects that I'm researching for a new book I'm working on, which will have a chapter on co-housing. Um, but I mean, the title "Impact of Housing Design on Cooperative Living" is interesting because you know, this initial research project was interested in how architecture design, I'm an architect, how design can impact how people live, but also I was really interested in how the cooperative, the social nature of these living arrangements change design, how people change their environments that maybe weren't intentionally designed for cooperative living, or how they modify them over time, or how they're engaged with the design process. And so I was really lucky to receive this fellowship about 3 or more years ago and visited I mean, over 200, 300 projects in total, but 73 of them were cooperative housing in many different countries, and including all three on that intro slide about what is co-housing, which are all really beautiful. As you heard, I'm an architect. I work at Utile, and I also have my own small design firm. I'm starting at the scale from 3 units to 330 units. I've experienced a lot of different multifamily housing. I really love housing. It's a fascinating design problem. It makes up the majority of our cities, and it's something everyone can connect with because we all live somewhere. Some of the examples of the buildings I've worked on. And then on the side, I do a lot of research with universities. Um, Worked on a book some years ago called The State of Housing Design, which is kind of a compendium of all kinds of contemporary US housing, but also have written on zoning and single stair housing and building code reform. So everything housing, it's a sickness, it's a problem. But it's great to find like a niche within design and architecture and something that I'm passionate about. So here we go, and I'm gonna go fast, so don't hold your breath. Um, this is the trip. It was, as you heard, around 5 trips, 11 countries, 4 continents, 73 projects, a lot of different tours, some interviews, um, sometimes got full access to buildings and had coffee with people and dinner and, saw how the co-housing community congregated. Other times just passed by or wasn't able to fully absorb it. And sometimes visited and had, live translation or worked with my broken Spanish to understand. I think the projects spanned all different typologies from low-rise, rural housing to very dense urban towers. There's also a real, chronology of the different projects. I did this after I visited everything and planned all the projects, but there was a quite even distribution from the 60s when a lot of these projects started with social movements up until present day. Oh, one thing a lot of them have in common is, I mean, the blue bar is like how long they took to build, and build being both a social and physical um, verb. And so it takes a long time. I'm sure you all know, working on building communities in Minnesota. Um, but I think the struggle is kind of part of creating the community. And I was also inspired or frustrated by the lack of literature around design and cooperative housing. There's a lot of white papers and articles about how different types of cooperative housing is good for mental health, good for family life, good for um, sense of community, and also a lot about how cooperatives can help affordability and us to save for retirement and live more equitably, but very little about just like design. Like, what does it unlock from a fundamental space planning perspective, and what how can we plan for it, and what possibilities does it unlock? So this is a collection of some books I found on it, and papers and pamphlets, and the research is really to try to contribute more to that research, to that knowledge. So you all know what cooperative housing is. I I looked at a lot of co-housing. It was also slightly broader. There was other kinds of cooperative housing, which I'll speak about. Um, and the main thing, of course, is, less private space and more shared space. But what is that shared space? And I work a lot in my practice on market rate and affordable housing, where there's a quite more limited sense of what can be a shared space, what kind of programs can be amenities in a building. And that's like on the left. And there's a much broader sense in these co-housing and a much, more lengthy list of the type of places that make living a full life, a long life, kind of forever somewhere possible. Things from a wood shop to a ceramic studio, a mushroom farm, car sharing, pizza ovens, guest homes, things that you just do not find in market rate housing. And it's not because people don't want them, it's because some of them are not possible without, cooperative living and that kind of shared social management that transpires. I also really like that co-housing is all about families and all about living somewhere, perhaps forever. There's a deeply American way of living where you start younger when you have a job in a city where the jobs are, and then you might move further out because it's where the better schools are, it's where there's more open space, there's more room for the things you need as you have a family or grow older. Um, and so you have to kind of keep moving. And I think, you know, it's also like you need to keep moving buildings as maybe your family grows or shrinks, and you need to then you can't always find the same building in the same community. And co-housing in particular, and some of the co-ops I visited in Europe were amazing in the diversity of spaces and the intention that people would live here for their entire lives. They're actually set up thinking all the way about from kids to older people, which the market generally doesn't do. And a lot of multifamily housing in the US is kind of geared towards that young professional, because that's where the money can be made. So the research looked at a lot of cooperative housing. Uh, you know, the four big categories were cooperatives, co-housing, co-living, and community land trusts. And the images on the right are like the most generic forms in which you find those, cooperatives being more urban multifamily. I mean, there's a lot in New York, but there's also a lot in Switzerland and Austria and Germany. And then co-housing, which the American legacy takes root in a Danish tradition, and they're most often lower rise, single family cluster subdivisions, but not always. And then co-living we know of is a little bit more like, urban places, furnished apartments, students, young professionals, these kind of like you have a smaller unit, but you can share kitchens and different kinds of living, but for not so much for families. And then community land trusts didn't have an architectural expression, so I was really curious to visit a lot of them. But it's where you know, a single cooperative entity owns many different pieces of land throughout a city, but they're all scattered sites. And so there's not like one facility. And what they share is more in neighborhood solidarity and affordability and a little bit less in design, but there are some interesting design aspects I found. Um, so that's like the categories, but this doesn't, it's so hard to describe the different types of co-housing and cooperative living with just these terms, which also have different terms in different languages. So this is the matrix I sketched and I'm still sketching to explain the different types of cooperative housing. And on one axis, on the top and bottom, is just the management of it and how people choose to organize themselves on a daily basis. And then on the x-axis is, real estate tenure, the financial stake in the property. And so I've visited, and there exists like co-housing cooperatives where they share the land. There's limited equity co-housing cooperatives. It's like affordable, everyone shares the land, and it's co-housing, so it's socially managed that way. But there's also, um, you know, very exclusive luxury private cooperatives, which you can see in Manhattan, and there's everything in between. I was really interested in ones that were the social aspect was cooperative. So some of them were a bit more, there's a lot of co-housing um, the homes are all just condos or fee simple homes, and you can sell them to whoever you want for as much as you want. And then it kind of cascades into like people have to interview and as a community all the way to like it's a very intensive process to join, and everyone shares a lot of the resources. So it's a big spectrum, and I think acknowledging the spectrum and thinking about what the spectrum means um, is critical when you're looking at spaces. This is just a map of like where you see the most common forms of co-housing and co-living on the East Coast. So co-living more in the urban centers, Baltimore, DC, Boston, New York, and then co-housing more rural and suburban, where traditionally groups have gone to find land to form a community where they could have a lot of space. There's the Cobb Hill co-housing, really interesting one in Vermont. And I'm sure you've had other speakers talk about the social organization of co-housing, of the different working groups, and like different buckets of how people, are efficient with their time and each contribute their own specialization. This is just one example of the groups that make up all the different, specialized working groups within the Marmalade Lade co-housing in England. But it was also interesting for me to find diversity among even co-housings of the same size. So on the left is 5 different co-housing and the frequency of communal dinners they had. There's that one on your intro slide, Ustrip in Denmark, that was very, cooperative. They have every single, 6 days out of the week, they have a shared meal and there's a huge rotation, and the pantry is bigger than my house. Um, Really amazing. And everyone's, it's a lot about dinners and it's a very intensive interview process. And there's other co-housing communities of the same size of homes, but have meals a lot less often. And this also wanes and ebbs and flows with time as people move out or, uh, you know, people age out or families move away. And that also plays into the dynamics. So there's just a big diverse range of frequency of that. The biggest section I'm here to kind of talk about is space and the different kinds of cooperative spaces. And it's going to be a slideshow of images and drawings of things that are similar, things that are different, starting with overlapping spaces. This is the Copper Lane co-housing in England, in a borough of London. They got together, were searching for a site. This is the urban fabric of England. It's a lot of masonette, row homes. You own the thing, 2 level, and long, thin gardens, dating back, a very long time. And they found this site that was landlocked, typically be um, not desired by any developer. It had no frontage. It was really unclear how it could be used for multifamily housing. The price was, less than optimum, which made it perfect for a group that needed a place to live. And they worked with a great architect to, you know, develop this type of building, 3 clustered units on each side. They share a common space in the middle, kind of below ground. It's based a little bit on, uh, it's not castle architecture, but there's a rural medieval type of building in Spain in the mountains that has this sort of um, clustering on a hillside formulation. And that way, actually, they're able to have a lot of thinner open spaces on the outside that I think you could see as being unusable, but when you walk through, they're all shared and used for really purposeful laundrying, gardening, and buggy storage. And similarly, you probably know this project, Jackson Meadows in near St. Croix, Minnesota. It's not co-housing, but it's a kind of cooperative style American single-family subdivision, which unlocked so much more beauty in the landscape and um, possibilities for interaction with nature and community life by not giving each home 5 acres, but by really constraining the size of the parcels and making all the pink areas common. And then there's a lot of shared paths through the homes. And so when I visited, it's just lots of kids biking around in different groups and all preserved meadowland. And it's a long story of preserved ecology. And that kind of ring road is very similar typology of site plan organization for co-housing. Instead of everyone getting a driveway, just one shared road, shared parking facilities, shared mail, shared cars themselves, and paths between the homes. And I think this is what, from an urban pattern point of view, what consolidating the vehicular circulation can do, what consolidating other kinds of site planning features, it opens up that next hierarchy of path through the site for people and for kids to be, safer walking and for connection between homes. And that's the kind of path you'd want to take every day. This is a drawing of the Jackson Meadow, which had a feature I noticed on other places, which speaks to more improvisational provincial monument to land ownership, where, in Jackson Meadows, all the parcels are individually owned. And then there's the shared space, but there's a thought that it should all feel a little shared, and maybe there's an invitation to come over sometimes. And so they have these corner fences, incomplete boundaries between units. So there are places that had not hard edges, but soft edges, and often with movable planters or furniture fixtures, which kind of establish borders, but in a way that could change over time and were more flexible because of the negotiation. And some of those photos were from this project, a cluster co-housing in the Netherlands. They really pioneered cluster co-housing, where I think, like many co-housing enthusiasts, realized, you really can't have too many homes in one facility. They can't all share a kitchen. And then maybe you could cluster if, maybe 8 homes, if 8 families can share a kitchen. And then so you could have like 4 groups of 8, but then 200 people, it might be too much to even organize a party. And so if you keep scaling up, you can create a community of thousands of people if you start at different modules. And so this is built in a larger row housing community in Netherlands, which is very common. And they're just each cluster, this is the common house kitchen for each cluster. But then as a part of a whole, they're still part of one whole co-housing and have block parties and share ideals. But there's a way the hierarchy keeps subdividing so that it's more manageable from a maintenance and, social organization point of view. But the site layout, the street layout, this walking pedestrian street, I found was interesting because it's, rather than make it a very efficient street, straight, and then have these houses, the community facilities, nestled between the houses and maybe a circle, they're kind of jutting into the shared street. And they become obstacles, but really also ways to view into the shared activity that's happening. And these apertures, ways of viewing stuff that's happening. Do I decide to go join that party? Oh, who's there? Like, do I want to talk to that person? They talk my ear off every day. I'm really tired. Oh, I didn't know they were doing that. They're doing painting classes. I got to talk to them about that. But that you're kind of invited in, but not always, you don't have to join if you want to. So that, aligning windows on both sides of these, but then interjecting them in the path and the temporary nature of all the different plantings that is used as a buffer for people's front doors, rather than a hard fence, gives this a real magical feeling in real life. And it's a public street, and there's a lot of projects that had really invited the public in, which is different than a lot of private housing. It's generally not wanted for liability reasons, security reasons. Banks are just scared of risk, and banks ultimately kind of decide the rules of most developments because they're providing the funding. But co-housing is built for people in a neighborhood, and They get to choose what's happening, and having a public street in the middle is sometimes really exciting. And demarcating the barrier between the public and the community is also a point of celebration and um, another moment for a soft barrier. This is JP Cohousing just down the street from where I live now. Another one in the US and one in DC. These kind of barriers are used to um, demarcate the portal. You can still come in, but it's a private community to be respected of. And that's that like overlapping between public and private at the big scale, the site scale of the neighborhood, and then this co-housing community. In the scale between units or between families, there's so many fascinating ways in which overlapping spaces that would typically be duplicated allowed more efficiency and also more possibilities for programming and really interesting architectural expressions where a garage is shared or a front stoop is shared, bike parking is shared, laundry is shared, and backyards are shared, and balconies are shared. This is the co-housing co-op in Melbourne, Australia, part of a larger development, and they have all these balconies on both sides, and they decided to put no dividers in, which is very common in a lot of the co-ops I visited, because they want the possibility to visit your neighbor. And if you don't want to, you can easily put a planter there, but if you put a divider there day one, then you'll never have the possibility of making friends. And these kind of shared balconies where people can interact horizontally, vertically, were really common and really fascinating ways in which the um, private residential open space, which is really important to urban living, quite rare in a lot of new US multifamily housing, gets kind of value engineered out, but almost mandated um, in Berlin and in London and Zurich. You actually can't build a housing unit in London without a balcony. It's part of the code, which I think is amazing. Those are the balconies, but even the hallways, whether they're exterior or interior, they're shared, of course. And I think in comparison to when we design typical housing and you want the hallways to be as small as possible, as efficient as possible, it's wasted space. It's non-rentable space, and architecture is all about efficiency. It's sort of an opposite approach in these co-housing and cooperatives where sometimes making it larger, being slightly inefficient, the hallway jogs allows other programming to happen, people to run into each other, small little libraries to transpire, offices, patios, leaving your furniture out. I think the messiness is lovely and resembles people living there and having their lives versus something so sterile. Other examples of the hallways. Should probably do a whole lecture on this schoonship co-housing in the Netherlands. It's all floating houses, and everyone designed their own house. The Netherlands loves water. And back to the idea of looking into a common space. Those were all the clustered common spaces on a path. This is an example of a more like, single building development in Australia. And this is the two, masses of units on either side, and then a garden and a parking lot. And there's the common house in the middle, situated, of course, between everything, but also really delineated with a lot of different openings of different sizes and with different angles to view in and out. So you can always see what's happening, and people can be invited or not invited. People can meet and chat kind of anywhere. And other kind of niches are made and not initially designed for what might happen there, but they will always be filled with different activities, leftover refuse, or borrowed furniture for people to use. And it's these apertures through spaces that look like layering through 6 layers of glass, or even from your home, where you have the private and a kind of semi-public hallway that then leads to a more public hallway. are really important. It's the main, psychological thing in housing is understanding the path one takes from the street all the way to the bedroom and finding ways to break that up in meaningful ways to provide um, mental separation from your job to your bed is important. And it's also gives moments for different kinds of, because public, semi-public, semi-private, fully private, even in, having your kitchen, living room on the outside, and then um, your dining room, and then your bedroom is that kind of same layering of spatial organization that is really important that these buildings take to the maximum and think about in many more deep articulated ways than a lot of typical housing, which is just like hallway unit as efficient as possible. I think a lot of housing, cooperative housing focuses on the, you know, big space for assembly. It's a lot of people. They're all going to get together at least at some point, and that can be a main design feature to base off of. The courtyard is the most common. Courtyard housing is all over Europe. We have less of it for urban pattern reasons, but we also have less of it for building code and zoning reasons, which make it hard to do. Um, but it's a great way to provide daylight and then a large private outdoor open space for the community. Um, but I also found other places of collective assembly, which are a little bit more unusual, like stairs. This is Abiona Housing Co-op in England, a series of renovated row homes, originally renovated partially by the local council and residents to provide shelter for um, gay men in the midst of the AIDS epidemic in England. And today still is a really vibrant community. And they kind of chopped up these row houses and introduced really whimsical geometric shared stair cores, and this had associated either like a shared bathroom, shared office, a shared guest suite. And those became, the kind of vertical places of assembly along with the common backyard. And stairs, particularly ones that have daylight, are partially exterior, have generous landings and zones for signage or plants or buggies or strollers or bikes, were really important for assembly and for providing a sense of home and community in denser buildings that need these kind of vertical cores. And of course, you have the common house, the main staple of co-housing, place where the meetings, dinners, shared meals all happen. I was, love taking photo of the same view, different rooms, and also to see how the kitchens were designed in different places. Um, Open shelving was a common feature where you have like 30 different people using the kitchen. No one knows where anything is. And labels can go so far, but really helpful to have a mixture of open and closed so that anyone can go in and help steward, clean, and cook for people. Um, and I really got mixed reactions from some people in these mugs. Some people love seeing a whole wall of diverse mugs, and some people were like, it's too messy. But I think the messiness is part of, it feeling like a home. And this the kinds of cooking you can actually unlock when you have the resources of 30 families together is much more diverse than the cooking you can have if it's just 30 families with 30 different individual kitchens. But if you make all the 30 kitchens a little bit smaller, you can unlock, greater barbecue, fire pit, pizza oven, um, all kinds of things that wouldn't otherwise be possible. And finally, for the spaces, I think back to the amenities and the, common spaces, the character of them felt so natural, but also I was like, why don't these exist in normal buildings I see when I'm designing them for clients? And it's it often ties to just spaces that are messy and loud. Um, for kids, for teenagers to have parties, for music, for watching scary movies, for doing pottery. But these are kind of the spaces that are why a single family house is so attractive because it's got a basement or a garage. And that kind of like basement garage in some way can still exist in a multifamily building if it's designed right and thought about ahead of time. But having the room to work on a bike, to have your hobby of fixing things or doing wood shop or space for all the junk that accumulates in our life is really important. I don't know how people build condo buildings without excess storage. We all have a lot of stuff, and I think stuff is kind of part of life and necessary in some aspects to pursue your passions. Whether it's like a kayak or dirt bike, you will definitely fix one day. And this, aesthetic of under construction is definitely a result of just a lot of people trying to um, manage and build a community, but it's also a generative uh, character of the spaces because uh, I found when things were not quite fully designed, and it often happened because the co-housing ran out of money. But it means the community can, see how they feel in the space, what they really need. They feel the power to change it later, because they are engaged a little bit more in the maintenance and construction of a building. And they feel ownership over the space if they're part of creating it outside of the original like formal building design and construction process. Um, and it's more changeable over time. And lastly, I mean, we know co-housing is for kids. It was great to see remnants of how like family, children, sports activities were faceted on existing buildings, or all the toys and strollers were all left out everywhere. Um, and a common remnant was the kids' room, usually near the common house while the dinner is all being prepped by everyone, but not directly next to it. It needs like a spatial separation distance because everyone's really loud, but it's where all the kids go to get out their energy before dinner. And it's full of 500 million pillows and soft furniture and spaces. Um, and oftentimes a separate teenager hangout for that awkward phase where they're not kids and they want to get up to no good. Um, the different types of units I spoke about earlier is really important so that the community can be vibrant over time. If it's all built same size units for families today, well, those families will age and maybe the kids will leave, and then it'll all, as a few old co-housings in Denmark are now, all mostly empty nesters that are aging, and the community loses a little bit of its purpose. It feels a little empty, and one solution is to build more homes, more density, but another solution is to build that diversity. And from the start, this is a very large development in Switzerland, hundreds of units, and they should have an incredible diversity of unit sizes that I don't see in American developments, all the way from 5-bedroom apartments to 3-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 1-bedroom studios, and then a co-housing unit within a larger cooperative, which is common. So this is a co-housing unit um, that you could rent just 1 bedroom of, and this is within a larger community. And some of the um, common kitchens and eating areas in 2 different co-housing communities inside of a larger cooperative. And the personalization that can be achieved when there's different size units for different people, and you can all the way from the expression of the architecture in a larger building, which needs to be resolved, or in single family um, or lower rise areas where everyone can design their own home. And I think the ability to personalize is key to making it feel like home. Easier said than done if everyone has the row house and the money to renovate their deck and paint it and do things, but still possible in a more professionally built multifamily building where you can build it into the layering of every single thing from the mailboxes to the front doors of units, to the coloration, to the balconies, to the name tags, to the signage and the fonts. I think really important and really key to making it feel um, like home. And lastly, this is a lesson I spoke about in my lecture, and I think just a kind of a funny story. There's trampolines at every co-housing, there's a lot of trampolines in Australia for some reason, and even more in Tasmania. But this is a site plan of I think it's the oldest co-housing in the world in Denmark. And this is their common yard. This is the landscape, common house, and all the row homes for people inside. And they had a trampoline. And I asked the person showing me around who founded it, or his least favorite part of the community that doesn't work. And he said, it's that damn trampoline. It's so loud, and the kids are playing on it all day and all night, and they're screaming, and I can't stand it. And somewhere else that would just be you'd have a meeting of the HOA or the condo board, and you'd be like, well, we can't allow that. It's like really annoying a lot of people. No fun. But what they decided, because the trampoline's really important for some families and kids, is that they'll just move it every season to a different quadrant of the open space. And so everyone has to share the burden of the trampoline for at least a season, and then they hear it a little bit less the rest of the year. But it's kind of a temporal spatial solution that I see as only possible through, cooperative social management of housing and the ideals of finding space for everyone. It's a solution that I wouldn't immediately come to mind for me either, because working with time is, not something I usually do as an architect. But landscape architects, that's what they do all the time. Yeah, I spoke about the unfinished aspect. I think this is just two end notes on co-housing. The under designing, the under building, it's really common result of running out of money, but something that I think then becomes a community creative exercise after construction when everyone's living there and they have to decide how they want to use these spaces. And they gain more authorship and ownership over them if they're the ones building and shaping them. And that the spaces they're creating are constantly negotiated over time. I think that's why they're all cluttered, full of stuff. But it means it's all up for grabs. It's all a little bit mine and yours. It requires, constant communication. It's a lot more work than if there were rules that say you can't store your shoes in the hallway. But it means a lot more things can happen. And I think a lot more fun and lives can be had. So I feel like I'm over time. I was going to share, I live here at this, we bought a triple decker with friends. I'm here in the top story of my friend's unit because my wife is putting our daughter to bed and I can't be loud and we don't have that many bedrooms. We did it to do a lot of projects. I have a whole thing about like organizing meetings. We also did it to unlock different spatial possibilities that like, this original building was designed for 3 families and all the spaces to be subdivided for 3. And that means multiplying everything by 3 washers, 3 cars. And we were really hoping over time as we work on it that through sharing space, we can unlock different kinds of programs that wouldn't be possible. The garage can be many different uses than just cars if we all decide to share keys and, park in the driveway, or the basement can be opened up to other uses. And over time, I think these can have huge neighborhood impacts. Sharing space across lots, densifying neighborhoods, adding ADUs. And this is our neighborhood in Jamaica Plain. And I won't go through these, but I'll just flip real fast that I'm working on a chapter in a new book on co-housing, and we have found about 5 recent ones built in the last 2 to 3 years. I can share this slide deck. They might be really interesting for your group because they're all urban and doing creating new kinds of multifamily that I have not seen, and they're only probably there because of co-housing. This one's in Seattle called One Shared Roof. There's one I've toured on Monday here in Boston area in Malden called Bay State Co-housing. Another beautiful courtyard and really interesting deck access units. There's Bowl City Commons Co-housing in Durham. Lovely balconies, access to green space, and garden, single dual aspect units. And then Ellen Browning, which is 10 families getting together to co-develop a infill lot in Portland, Oregon, with these flat units with all these terraces, and then the interaction between the terraces as well is really important. Finally, this Corvidae co-op in Seattle by Frolic, a really interesting developer that is looking at how to subdivide single-family lots and add density, and through a kind of cooperative co-housing model, people share kitchen and open space and navigate the steep terrain. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Sam. Now we'll have Q&A. And actually, I wrote down a question way back at the beginning where you had pictures of a self-built kind of a high-rise building in London. And by self-built, do you mean they actually were hoisting the beams?
I do. Not the row house. Which building was it?
Well, it was tall and it had green girders or something. And you said it was in a self-built in England.
Oh yes. They have a professional contractor, but they're contributing some of their labor to it. Like everyone had to contribute 100 hours, I believe, over the couple of years. A little bit like how Habitat for Humanity does it here. Not as many hours and under the supervision of licensed electricians and people. Yeah, because I know with the modern world, a lot of these stories of co-housings from the 70s, I'm like, well, I can't do that anymore. Like the building codes are too complex, but there's still ways to interact with even a professional construction.
So I'm kind of looking at the gallery here, and if anyone has a question, they need to raise their hands and maybe open their video. Or
Sam,
just
I'm curious how you identified the communities that you wanted to look at.
Yeah, a lot of books, articles, and Googling, and it's really I identified a lot. The question was like how to choose which ones to visit, I think, because there's so many. And I really wanted to visit the ones that had the most interesting, architectural and urban and landscape design, because I think that was the thrust of the research. Um, but then also the last filter is like ones that are possible to visit, either ones that answered my emails, ones that were like within, I did this all while working a full-time job with American PTO, which is limited, and I, took my wife and we used all our vacation for several years on just research. And so would usually start in a city and have a rent a car and go around different places. And there's a lot I missed I wish I could have gone to, but and then you have to organize all the tours somehow to have to align with people's personal life schedules, and they're spending their Saturday afternoon showing you around their home and having coffee. And um, I'd say, yeah, the thrust was to visit ones that were the most interesting and were probably the least documented online, because there's a lot that have tons of, maybe it's from famous architects, and I'm like, okay, but like we know what that's like, but what about the ones people don't know about, or um, ones that are really hard to experience digitally, that being on the ground matters a lot. And even if my photos generally didn't have people in them, it's mostly because it's private, housing, and I didn't want to take photos of people without their permission. But these places were so alive and so full of life, and I had dinners, and um, yeah, that's definitely also a part of it.
in the chat, someone is asking that Netherlands community that had so many residents, how did that affect their governance structure? Because I know you mean Katie and Chuck say your ideal size is 30 units or something. How do they
Yeah.
manage with so many people?
Yeah, the book is cluster co-housing. Let's see if I can put in a link. Um, they it's a great book because they like looked back at this community 30 years later. No, yeah, it's from the 70s, so actually 50 years later, and interviewed people. But I'm not sure the exact specifics of the social structure. I imagine it's a little bit like a nation state where the large governance is like has a board, and then each household group can have a representative on the board, and then there's a certain mixture of democracy and consensus. Um, I know, yeah, every co-housing kind of has to choose like full consensus, consensus -1, just democracy, something in between. Um, but I think it operated a little bit like a representative system.
Hey, Maria, you go ahead, except you're muted. Now you're not. Good.
Okay, my question is, did you have a specific community that really impacted you? And did you implement any specific thing, like very specific? I don't mean maybe did you implement a trampoline, but just how did that impact your own design when you're, going back to Boston?
Yeah, I think the one of my top favorite ones was Yestrip Savark, and it's in your slide, and it's semi-modern, couple decades old in Denmark, low rise. It's like black tar painted wood shed buildings in a courtyard arrangement in a more rural area, 45 minutes outside Copenhagen. Um, but the internal organization is so fascinating. You know, Denmark's a cold place, and it's a very efficient arrangement to have what's called a double loaded corridor, where you'd have like a hallway and units on both sides so that you can, you're building the hallway, you might as well put units on both sides. But the hallway is like 12, 15 feet wide, and it's got skylights that are operable. And it's just a whole like garden atrium throughout that becomes like a social hallway. The building has all these stepped terraces. They use elevation in so many creative ways for spatial differentiation and privacy that it just feels like such a complex, rich spatial experience to walk around. And the units were different sizes, and everyone was lovely. And they said they have like a summer party with like 500 people, and they invite everyone from surrounding neighborhoods. And then they have like cascading levels of social gatherings. Um, they're the ones that have the dinner every single night of the week. So it's a lot of work. And they were like, we have one opening, but we're really hoping to have a carpenter come buy a place because we need a carpenter. So they're also very specific on like who they need to fill a role. And I think you have to go to like 4 meals and have been a member of it for a year before you might even be invited to purchase a unit. So really amazing, really intense as well. That was my favorite. They also had everything was painted a cobalt blue, which I love. Um, what have we implemented? I don't know. I think we're just we keep realizing, we keep having to learn the lesson that we need to have meetings that are about fun and also have meetings that are about work. Sometimes we get in everyone's really busy with life. At the time since setting this up, there's been 2 weddings, a dog has got adopted, we now have a kid, 3 renovations are happening, people change jobs, everyone has a busy life, but we have meetings a lot, and a lot are about just like, oh my God, the taxes, and like, oh, we got to do this project. We have all these projects, and we got to get the electrician. And we used to have a lot more meals together. And so we're just trying to like get more meals together and be like, okay, we got to do it all. Like, we got to get the social benefit, and just because we will all end up talking about that thing we need to fix together. And it's like, no, wait, no, wait, let's just be like friends today. So I think like that balance, which I'm not as good at, because I love talking about the windows, is important. And just, it's not all about the architectural project.
Okay, James Wheeler has a question.
Hey Sam, thanks so much for your talk. It's great to hear. I had two questions and a compliment, I guess. I know we don't always get a chance to say the great things about this, but for whatever it's worth, if you could bring it back to Utile, I think that the work that you guys do is fantastic, and the graphics are something that I point to for my students for their kind of
Great.
urban scale work. So thank you for that work. I'd be really interested in, I always try to kind of point people that are interested in a career path, working in kind of affordable or public or supportive housing, towards different co-housing and other options that go beyond some kind of traditional models of funding. And so I was wondering if you could talk about maybe when you got involved in co-housing, if it was during your time on the coast, or if it was after you headed to Harvard. And then the other thing is I had the great opportunity to see Grace Kim, who leads Schemata workshop out in Seattle at NOMA last year, and she gave a keynote on co-housing, and she and her partner helped develop Capitol Hill urban co-housing. So I was wondering if you could speak to if there was any really good integrations of the kind of community house into kind of urban scale or like really dense co-housing developments, because I think that that's one of the few examples that like I've come across that I was really impressed with. And I was wondering if, as you saw things overseas, if you saw any examples of really nice integration into kind of a dense shared community space.
Yeah, it's great to hear. And thanks for the questions. Yeah, Grace Kim is great. Well, oh gosh, the first question or the second question was about what was the second question?
First was when you got interested in co-housing, and then second
Oh,
was
yes. Yeah.
if you had any examples of other kind of really kind of dense co-housing development in urban spaces that have that kind of integrated common house, but just kind of in a tighter development rather than a separate structure.
Yeah, I mean, I worked on this research proposal when I was graduating Harvard, and really, I don't know, got into housing at the same time getting into cooperative housing from I don't know, looking back at my own library of books and like what I'm really interested in the city. I mean, I went to grad school to pursue architecture that's a little bit more based in the neighborhood and relating to people. I'd worked at firms where we're doing big stuff in different places I would never see, and that didn't feel like a relationship to improving my neighborhood. And housing's always been an interesting typology. There's not enough good housing in the US, and it's not a area of architectural practice that a lot of top, graduates are geared towards, and a lot of top schools don't like highlight that as a laudable path, at least at like the highest level, which then trickles down. And um, I just feel like it's a huge missed opportunity, and I really love it as a career path. It's like multi-scalar. I work at the scale of zoning citywide, but also at like handrail details. So there's like so many different scales you can tackle it, and it's a logistical problem. You have to stack plumbing, but it's also a human personal experience that we can all relate to. Like, how do I like to cook? Like, how do I want to make this kitchen? Like, I don't know how a scientist laboratory works, and I may never be, so I'd probably be a bad architect of, a lab building. And cooperative housing, I think when I just like learn more about the different types of housing that is happening, it is so much more interesting as spatial experiences, and it seemed to be a category of living that was based around living. Like a lot of multifamily housing in the US, market rate is there because it's a way to make money. Like developer clients are like, I mean, I could put my money in the market or I could develop. Like, this is a way to get a return, and the buildings are a result of gearing towards low risk and market opportunities, and not like, for people to live in them necessarily. And affordable housing is very constrained by cost and driven by a lot of regulations that have good foundations, but at the end of the day is just trying to get built units and doesn't always have the like resources to aspire beyond that. So it's there's a diagram I didn't share, but it's like co-ops and co-housing. They're like outside of both of those systems and can sometimes be self-perpetuating affordability, or creating communities that are self realizing. So that's what got me really interested in. And yeah, I think the last I'll bring this back up. Where are we? these last urban ones, I think we're choosing only projects for the last 3 years, so there's also other ones in the US. I think it's really important to look at US housing because the rest of the world builds really good housing, but it has completely different building codes. And so a lot of the ideas are hard to translate immediately. Tons of great inspiration. Of the size of like 30 households, that urban coop project in Melbourne is exactly the right size and would be a great precedent. It's called Urban Coop, and it's part of Nightingale Housing Community, which is a large, really sustainable, interesting development in Melbourne. I mean, One Shared Roof, this one in Seattle, is amazing. I wasn't aware of it until like 3 weeks ago, and it's One Shared Roof. The roof is extremely activated with all the shared programming, and even though the courtyard is, you could imagine drawing that on a piece of paper and thinking that would be dim and dark and terrible. But actually, when it's detailed right and it provides this like lovely spatial separation for units, and it feels like you're arriving, outdoors to your front door rather than just through a hallway. And the ground floor is a lot of public retail, co-working, cafe, and really activated. My colleague just visited it, and he was amazed on just a weeknight how active it was, and it's totally public. You can walk in. Yeah, I think we need more co-housing urban examples because we need to densify, we need to have walkable communities. And yeah, I can like share this whole deck or the recording is there. And we can email more about other projects as well.
I think Holly had a question and then Paul, and that might wrap up our questions.
Great,
Holly?
thanks. Yeah, thanks so much, Sam. It's terrific to see all the photos of all the examples. I'm wondering, since there are a lot of us here who are probably very interested in building co-housing, if you're not going to be the architect to help build our co-housing, do you have suggestions for the kinds of things that we might ask or help that would help us recognize architects who might be able to help us really do good design for shared cooperative living?
I would love to be the architect.
Call you up.
I should have plugged I'm starting a small firm, so we would love to do that.
Well, so
Yeah,
then
I
what are
mean-
your constraints? And then beyond that, if it can't be you, then who is it? How do we figure out who it is other than going to somebody who's already built a bunch of them?
Yeah, and there's only a few firms in the country that have built a bunch.
That's right.
And they're not in Minnesota, so they might not know. I mean, finding a local firm is usually very advantageous because they know local codes and zoning and contractors. I mean, I think it's usually just you would write a good RFP or RFQ and search different architects to submit to interview or for qualifications first. I think it's probably important to find someone who wants to be a long-term partner because it's going to be a long journey and willing to just work with your timeline, which will be more chopped up and longer than a traditional, developer timeline. And then finding a developer is like also a developer and architect are like two the biggest long-term relationships that should be great working with each other and working with you. And you will have to be a good client, which is I've worked before with like a condo that was for like 8 homeowners, but they had no organization, and it's like 8, couples therapy for 8 different families. And it's hard to be a good client sometimes, but then you have to have organization and leadership and like one voice and make decision making quickly. But I think someone who values, just social living and cooperative living and just a firm with the right values, sustainability and usually architects have those values, most of us.
And Paul?
Thank you.
Sam, first, I'm just blown away by the depth of your presentation. And I understand that you have ideas and thoughts about how design can impact or contribute to equity in our society. I'm wondering if you want to share a couple of those.
Yeah, I can a little bit. I mean, I was the lead designer on this report we called Equitable by Design, and it's a really a zoning report. And equity for us was just legalizing urban multifamily housing, which is a crazy that it's a radical concept. But we had a team, and one person on the team, Amy Dane, had written a report on zoning in Massachusetts. And the story is that all the cities and towns downzoned in the 60s um, during white flight, during urban renewal. So there's like racial instincts, class instincts for the downzoning to like fix their towns in time. And they haven't changed their zoning in 60 years. There's a state law now to kind of push towns to update some of their zoning. And we wrote this whole research report and did a project, worked with 3 towns who wouldn't have been able to hire a design consultant to work on their zoning, and developed a very light zoning code, which could be a template for zoning reform. But really for us, equity was just like making room for everyone in a city. And a lot of these places, I think people are finding out like, oh, like if their kids are now looking for housing and they can't find it and they can't live in their community because there's no affordable housing because nothing's been built in 60 years and there's a real housing crisis. I've never done an as of right project in my architectural career in New England, which means like it follows the zoning, it doesn't need variances. Like every project I've ever done needs variances because that's how it is here. 100% of the city of Boston is non-conforming. We have the longest zoning code in the country. Some people think the world. And there's a lot there with just equity around, legalizing the forms of housing that allow everyone to live in a community. Suzanne?
You're muted. You're muted.
Have to make it fairly quick if you can, Susan. You're muted.
Susan, you're muted. Where are those buttons?
There we go. Sorry, I lost you there. There you go. I'm so sorry. I was driving home when I tried to catch this. Yes, I'm a parent of young adults with disabilities. I've been also associated with housing with disability for some time, or differently abled people as well. And in all my years of doing our housing project and also speaking to parents through our workshops, the number one thing they'd like to do is, intergenerational housing, housing that could accommodate the intentional community staffing. And so co-housing has come up quite a bit. And I'm just wondering, in all your kind of studies out there, if you've seen anything, with taking that into consideration for design. That's number one. And number two, because people don't have to live in, groups anymore to get services. We're in the age of deinstitutionalization, and we have been for some time, but it's in looking for natural supports. The second piece would just be, are you familiar with John Ballard and the 3D printing for housing and the amazing things that he's doing with materials? As he's saying, kind of our materials are old school, and the types of shapes and the types of organic spaces that he makes that are amazing, beautiful. And I have a design background. I was a designer for a long time as well.
Great. I'll make it quick. Ye Oh yeah, disabilities. I have family members with different needs, and I really want to do a study in intergenerational living examples. I don't have all the precedents I wish I did. I've heard of a lot of great ones. I think co-housing is a huge template. I visited a group in Australia also that was working on developing a kind of co-housing co-op for people with dementia and their family members to help be supportive.
Yep.
And it's just like you know, maybe it's not co-housing, but it's a way of thinking about architecture and housing where, I mean, they
Okay.
wanted, you know, them to have their own unit and then there to be like two other units for family members that are like semi-connected but could be shut off. So they could have like their day alone or they could visit very easily. And that kind of flexibility doesn't jive with traditional housing that you want to rent and sell. And it's a more like custom solution that needs to be, you know, specifically planned for people, but could unlock so many different kinds of care. And
Yeah.
I want to make it happen. I need to like, I would love to look for examples. It's great. It's multi-generational. I keep hearing about, yeah. And I think I think I may have written on the icon 3D printing in my last book. Um, I'm a little bit more skeptical of it because it solves the easiest part of a house to build, which is the framing, and not the more complicated parts. But I mean, we need all kinds of solutions to build more housing. So I hope it continues to be more, you know, sustainable and
Yeah,
whatever works.
he started in affordable housing as well. But I mean,
Ah,
we look at in America, we put people in places, right? We put the elderly here, we put this place, and we're
yeah.
so separated. We're not solving the problem of how we do those supports, which is, of course, where you see with co-housing.
Right.
But I think as the autism population is upon us, we see a lot of people that want to do that segregation, kind of the different types of models, but you know, if the government says we're not supposed to do segregation, and so there's some laws around how you get services when you have to live within certain types of settings that aren't
Thank you,
institutional.
Susan. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry.
you very much. I think it's
Thank-
time
Okay.
to wrap up the questions.
Yeah.
And Paul has a few things to tell us, and we're going to say a few words about local groups. So Paul,
Yeah.
go
Sure.
ahead.
Sam, just want to thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge, your time, and your passion tonight. Just wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I would like to ask Lynn and Lee to turn on their camera if they would please, because I want to say the theme of Co-housing Minnesota this year is catalyzing co-housing. At the heart of this is Lee, Becca, and Lynn, who comprise our vision circle, legally known as our board. And there are board positions open if you would like to join these talented, hardworking leaders. Think about it. There are also volunteer opportunities in Co-housing Minnesota for event planning and communications. If you're interested, please put your name in the chat or go to our website. By definition, as you probably have figured out by now, co-housing groups are autonomous and they start themselves. We are now going to get to hear from a few local groups about their uniqueness and what they're working on. The order will go in as Twin Cities Family Cooperative, Cedar Cohousing, Monterey, Kinney Cohousing, and Active Adult Cohousing in the Northland. Would you please begin, Becca?
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Sam, for such a wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it. And I think one of my favorite parts was inefficient hallways. I'm going to take that back to my community, which is Twin Cities Family Cooperative. I'm also glad that you mentioned that there are getting to be more urban co-housing communities. So I'll try and keep this quick. Oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted to do.
Did you want to go to full screen too?
Yep,
Becca?
that's what I was trying to do.
Sorry.
Yes, so Twin Cities Family Cooperative is an urban intergenerational cooperative. We are a mixture of co-housing where individual households have their own living unit, and co-living where different units are shared. Our common house is the main floor, 2 apartments. So we share a kitchen, a dining room, a guest bedroom, a music parlor, a game room, a library. We're really trying to maximize that shared space here. Some things that are unique about us or interesting are that, as our name suggests, we're very family focused. We range in age from about 5 to 75. and we share nightly dinners. So we really are working on sharing life together in as many ways as possible. We just moved into this property this past May, so we've been living together for about 5.5 months, and we are slowly welcoming in new members. So I will let me go back out of here because I just want to share one more slide here. And I noticed that our wonderful architect, Adam Jonas, is also here tonight from Awaken Architecture. So our building that we're in right now is 7 units. It is phase 1 of our community. Phase 2 is to build on this additional building with garage and then 2 floors of living space to basically double the size of our community. So I will put in the chat a link to our interest form. And like I said, we are welcoming new members and we would love to hear from folks.
And just how many trampolines do you have, Becca?
We have 1 trampoline. We have the required trampoline and it gets a lot of use.
And the joyful noises coming out of their place. It's just lovely, you guys. I got to tell you. Okay.
We also have monthly events. So if anybody is interested in joining us for those events, sign up for our newsletter, which you can find. You can sign up for on our interest form. You can also find out more about us on our website, tcfamilycoop.com, and we have a Facebook page. So yeah, thank you so much.
You'll put your web address in the chat, please, right?
Yep, I can go ahead and put that in.
Thank you, Becca.
And so I'll speak for Cedar Cohousing, and my group of Cedar Cohousing, I put our webpage. Our goal was to have an urban community with low carbon footprint, close to transit and other kinds of amenities. We're a small group and we have found finding urban properties a quite difficult thing. But if the idea of an urban dense community appeals to you, please check us out. And then I also wanted to mention, I'm speaking for Monterey Cohousing, which is in St. Louis Park. They're named after a street called Monterey, not the peninsula in California. But they were established in the 1990s. They have a large old building that they rehabbed, and then they built some townhomes, and they recently sold a unit. So there is some turnover, and so new people keep coming in. And then lastly, in River Falls, Wisconsin.
I think Maria was going to share about that, Becca. Is that correct?
Maria, you speak on them. You talked to them last, I think.
Okay. So in River Falls, Wisconsin, so just slightly outside of the Twin Cities area, is Kinney Cohousing. And they've already toured 3 different properties, have a bunch of interested members. But Christina, who's running it, she's super amazing, is really spearheading it, and she wants to have as many people join their info session as possible. So if you're interested at all, I'll put it in the chat.
I've got it in the chat. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, check them out. It's really nice.
I believe this Sunday, the 26th.
Yep.
Yep.
And Maria couldn't be with us tonight, but thank you, Maria. I mean, Christina couldn't be with us tonight, but thank you, Maria. And then Lee Pedersen, coming to us from lovely Duluth.
Hello from Duluth, Minnesota. I am the organizer, the burning soul for active adult co-housing for the Northland, to be a 55+ community somewhere in Duluth. I keep looking for partners, so I'm sending right now into the chat my email address. Come on. There we go. And the interesting thing about Duluth is that we have a very developing situation up here, that senior housing is being prioritized. And we recently released a work plan for downtown Duluth to find a way to get 1,500 units in downtown Duluth. So I think that there's a stupendous opportunity to associate with these development efforts that the city and the county want. So join me.
Thank you, Lee. Co-housing Minnesota educates about co-housing through events like this, our monthly newsletter, and our online discussion forum. Also, by special arrangement, we can provide access to national co-housing benefits for a donation to Cohousing Minnesota for $60 or more. Please go to our website for information about that. Board members will stay on for a few minutes after the meeting to answer general questions you may have about co-housing or Cohousing Minnesota. And everyone who registered for this event will get a follow-up email with links and references. And if you want to see the recording, that's where you're going to find it. As we close, please wave your thanks to the Cohousing Minnesota Event Circle, which put this event together. These people are Lynn, Becca, Maria, and yours truly. Thank you, James. Finally, we want to thank all of you for coming and for being a great audience. We're so glad you came and hope to see you in the future. Good night. And as I say, if you want to stick around afterwards, we'll kind of open it up to additional questions. But the formal portion of tonight's event is now adjourned. Thanks a lot, everybody.